It's a football Friday. On this edition of the Locked On Dynasty podcast, we'll tell you which player should be in your starting lineups and who's better left to the bench.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Thank you for listening to the Locked On Dynasty podcast. It's a reminder that you can follow our show and hear new episodes ad-free daily on Amazon Music. I'm your host, Michael Fabiano. You can find me on the X machine at Michael_Fabiano. And today I'm joined by my pal, the hardest working man in the fantasy football business, the legendary king, Bob Harris. He is on X at Football Diehard. We appreciate you, of course, for making us your first listen of the day and being an everyday listener on the show, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to come use across the app. So make sure you check that out. Hey, Bob Harris, what's going on, my man? How are you? It's a football Friday here on the podcast.
Not much, young fella. I've usually sat in with Marcus Mosher, the great one, and you'll do though. This will be a good time. We've done plenty of work together, so looking forward to this.
And we're going to do something different here on the podcast moving forward, which is we're going to talk starts and sits because that's what people want. Yeah. Who do you get into your lineup? Who maybe you need to fade this week? We've got two teams on a bye, of course. You've got the Texans and the Vikings. Everybody else is in play. Sans the Eagles and the Giants who played on Thursday night, and what a performance from Jackson Dart and Cam Scatabo. If you started them, congratulations. But let's start off here with the quarterbacks, Bob. And one of the guys that I really like this week is Jordan Love. He's coming off a bye week. He had 20-plus points in two of his previous three games. And the matchup is really good this week against the Bengals. I mean, they've given up 19-plus points to three quarterbacks, including giving up almost 26 to Bo Nix and over 20 to Jared Goff over the last two games. Give me your thoughts on Jordan Love in this game, Bob.
Yeah, I mean, since he's past defense has been a mess. I guess my only concern with Jordan Love, and they're minimal, who is going to be the playmaker? Somebody has stepped up. Tucker Kraft seems likely. Romeo Doubs, we saw against Dallas having the huge game. Somebody needs to have one of those big performances to keep Josh Jacobs from stealing all the thunder, especially when they get down inside the red zone. So I do like Jordan Love in this one. I think it's a great matchup. Looking at the Bengals giving up, about the seventh most points to the position on the whole. It's not too bad.
If you had to pick one Packers receiver, and I guess we could throw Tucker Kraft in there as well. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. Is there a guy that you trust more than the rest? I mean, Romeo Doubs had 3 touchdowns against the Cowboys. Is that chasing the points? Would you prefer Matthew Golden? If there was one Packers wide receiver that you had to stream this week, who would it be?
Yeah, if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. This always has been like a game of whack-a-mole. To me, the easy answer is Tucker Kraft if you're going to include him. He's a monster at his position, dominant force, and gets the consistent looks where the receiving core, the wide receiving core, it can be a hodgepodge. It's kind of mostly been a game of whack-a-mole going back a couple of years. It's only going to get worse, people. Christian Watson's, potentially could come off IR. I don't know if they'll activate him this week, but his practice window's open. That'll only further dilute the pool. So Dobbs is probably the safest play of this group, but he's not the only play. I mean, if you're in desperation mode as we head in deeper into bye season, Matthew Golden will be there and maybe Christian Watson.
Yeah. I also like Justin Herbert this week. And I got to be honest with you, I've been wrong about him lately. I thought he would put up a good point total, last week. In his last 3 games, he hasn't even hit 15 points. But I feel like this is the week. And Miami's defense is bad. We talk about the Cowboys being, this cheat code for quarterbacks. Miami's defense has allowed more than 23 fantasy points to 4 quarterbacks in their first 5 games. And they're giving up the 3rd most points to the position overall. And so despite his struggles, Bob, is Herbert in your top 10 this week? Do you feel like he's a startable asset, or you're worried about the fact that the numbers have not been great lately?
Yeah, all of the above. Yes, he is locked into my top 10, top 5, actually. And most of it is based on the matchup. There are concerns, or legitimate concerns. Obviously, don't have the rushing game. It's funny how this offense kind of evolved a little bit, and it's pretty obvious why. They started out the season, they were leaning more heavily into Herbert and the passing game that we've ever seen, the Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman, duo do in the past. And I think it's because they decided at some point, man, we're going to lean into the best player on our team, and that is Justin Herbert without fail. And so things have shifted since then. They've had injuries at running back, but more importantly, they've had injuries along the offensive line. Both their starting tackles are gone. That's been a huge loss. So I'm concerned about the backs coming in, Hassan Haskins and Kamani Vidal. Can either of them pass protect effectively? That's a little bit of a worry. So I feel like Herbert's a great play. He has a great receiving core. We've seen Quentin Johnston rise to the forefront and become, most weeks a pretty dominant force. Keenan Allen has been the Keenan Allen of old. Ladd McConkey, we miss you. Hope you come back soon, sir. And the Miami defense has been so there's a lot to like, but it's been a little bit concerning the last couple of weeks. I'm just hoping that Herbert's talent, like honestly, when he's on point, it's hard to say there's a quarterback that looks like they play better than him.
And you also are in on Bo Nix this week in that London matchup against the Jets.
Yeah, I think this is an easy one. When I'm doing my sits and starts, I'm doing them against the Football Guys projections. You can go to footballguys.com and check those out. And so Nix is projected to be quarterback 13. I'm looking for little edges. I think he has a quarterback one finish in him. Going up against the Jets defense, they've allowed, 4 touchdowns and nearly 30 points, 28 points to Dak Prescott last week. But multiple quarterbacks have had good games against him. And Nix finally seems to be hitting stride. You saw it in the game-winning drive midway through the fourth quarter last week against the Eagles. Went 4 for 4 for 82 yards on passes of 10 or more air yards. He's got some good receiving assets. And so I'm pretty keen on him this week, or at least keen enough to think that he will finish in quarterback one territory.
A couple of quarterbacks that I'm fading this week, and Jared Goff is one of them. And I get it. Like, the total is high in this game against Kansas City, but look at Kansas City's defense. They've allowed just 2 quarterbacks to score more than 11.5 points this season. Keep that in mind. And they've surrendered just 16.1 points to opposing visiting quarterbacks since 2024. So they're tough at home. Goff is typically not as good on the road. And even though the total in this game is high, I feel like the Lions are going to score points in other places, maybe in the running game. So I'm off of the Goff bandwagon outside of Superflex. And I'm also not into Tua this week. I was wrong about him last week. He had a good game. Carolina's defense had been pretty tough on quarterbacks, but Tua's still been held to under fewer than 16 points in 3 of 5 games. And the Chargers are giving up 13.7 points per game to quarterbacks on the road in their last 10 road games. So I think Tua is probably a super flex. I want your thoughts on Goff and Tua.
Yeah, they hit Jaden Daniels. First game back from injury last week, but he kind of struggled to put up the numbers, and they lead more heavily on the rushing attack. I think that's a fair point of emphasis there. So, yeah, I'm kind of with you on this one. Don't feel the need to force Tua. Well, I feel like I'm this every week. Like we saw 2 weeks ago, the Monday night game, Tua looked like peak Tua, right? When he is on point, he looks as good as anybody. Don't be fooled, people. He's not going to give you that production every week, and it's a bit of a crapshoot. And so I'm avoiding that. And plus, Miami in general seems like a little bit of a mess. I am kind of interested. They get Darren Waller back in the mix. Mike McDaniel maybe has that kind of chess piece that he can effectively use to create mismatches and maybe make some big plays. But aside from Devon Achane and maybe some, streamy shares of Waller, I'm not trying to force anybody in this lineup, in this matchup into my lineup.
We'll go back overseas to London for the quarterback that you're worried about this week, and that's Justin Fields, compared to the Football Guys projections.
Yeah, he's projected as quarterback 14. I don't think he's going to hit it, right? Like, he's always got that upside, the rushing equity. Anytime he can give you something. If you're in a super flex league, you can always play him as your quarterback too, regardless of matchup. But we saw last week. I mean, it wasn't great. It ended up great, but it wasn't great. They had to get into garbage time, and it wasn't his legs that did it. It was his passing that did it. I don't think you can count on that every week. And of course, going up against the Denver defense, it's pretty tough. They're ranked top 10 defensively against quarterback, top 10 against pass catchers with at least a 1-score lead. And so a lot not to like about Justin Fields in this one. Plenty of other fish in the sea this week.
You got to hope that he can run for, 40 and a touchdown and maybe give you some potential garbage time points like he did last week against the Cowboys. So next up, Bob and I are going to dive into the running backs, including 2 big names who you might actually want to keep on the sidelines this week. You're listening to the Locked On Dynasty podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Today, you can order and see parts, and they're on your doorstep the next day. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Like, do you need parts for a project? Like, I'm always doing projects around my house everywhere. And Supply House has next day delivery. And that is an absolute game changer when you're working on projects at your house. I also love the part finders tool and the 3D schematics. Like, those alone can save you hours on jobs where every detail is going to matter, because listen, this is your home. You also have to appreciate that the Trademaster perks that they have, like priority shipping, dedicated support. It makes the whole process just a lot smoother for you. So join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. And that's obviously very important. So visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use the promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real. All right, welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty podcast. Bob Harris, Michael Fabiano here with you. And now we're going to talk about the running backs. And the running back position got a little thin, got some injuries. We got some guys who are just not proving themselves to be the stars we thought we were getting in drafts. But first, I want to start off with the starts, and we're going to go back to London. I've never been there, but I bet you it's probably a pretty cool place.
Nice.
I think J.K. Dobbins is going to like his time in London. Let's put it that way, Bob. Like, Dobbins has been really good. Like, look at his numbers. 5.2 yards per rush, 14 plus points in 4 of 5 games. And now he's got the Jets, Jets. They've surrendered 17 plus fantasy points to 3 running backs, including 2 who've had more than 26. And if you watch last week's game, which I was shocked that the Cowboys beat the brakes off the Jets like that, Javonte Williams had a massive game against this defense. So keep that in mind. Start J.K. Dobbins and start Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt. And I got to be honest with you, I wasn't into him the first few weeks. I wanted to wait until he finally got that start and led the team in snaps and touches. Well, lo and behold, Bob Harris, that happened last week. He found the end zone twice against the Lightning Bolts. Bears this week, they've given up 12 plus points to 5 running backs, including 3 who've had more than 15. And also, they're giving up over 6 yards per rush, Bob. So Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt should be in lineups. Give me your thoughts on Dobbins and the rookie this week as we get into week 6.
Yeah, I've been on Dobbins all season long. My colleague Cecil Lammy, who covers the Denver Broncos on a daily basis as well, said when they signed him, like, this is not, he's not there as depth. He's the 1A to Harvey's 1B. And remember, they brought him in after they had a full mini camp and a full set of OTAs with Harvey. They knew they needed this help. So I think as long as Dobbins is in the locked and upright position, he's going to continue providing frontline production. I think our guy Bill, Ja'Cory Crosky-Merritt, we've been waiting for this moment, right? And I kind of predicted it last week. I felt like the Jaden Daniels coming off injury, no Terry McLaurin, no Noah Brown, was going to be a nice game for them to give Bill the ball, and give it 2 of them. They did. But the turning moment, the turning point here, Fabs, came in the fourth quarter. Crosky-Merritt fumbled on the first play of the fourth quarter, gave the Chargers a shot, looked like they were on the ropes. They could have made a comeback. If you're Dan Quinn, you've got a 7th-round rookie running back playing in his 5th game. It would be easy to just take a seat, kid. But no, they leaned into him. They fed him more. He had runs of 10, 9, and 15 yards to close out the game and help seal the win. This is now Bill's backfield, and I'm happy to play him.
And that's kind of what we were waiting for. I mean, there was a lot of hype. And I think we've learned one thing, that preseason hype, you shouldn't really, maybe not completely ignore it, but you shouldn't just jump on the bandwagon completely. Trevion Henderson is the perfect example. But it took a little bit of time, right? 7th-round guy, as you mentioned. And now it looks like his backfield. And the matchup is right. You've got 2 teams off this week. So, most of the running backs are available to us. But we've got so many guys who are just not playing off the snuff right now that, Crosky-Merritt should be in lineups. You also love a guy that I dig, and I talk about him every week, and that's Quinshon Judkins.
Yeah, I mean, he has moved into must territory to me. He's projected to finish his running back 14 this week. I think the matchup gives him a little more leeway. But what do we want to play in fantasy football? Where do the points come from? Points come from opportunities. Volume is the primordial sludge from which all fantasy points rise. And if you look at Quinshon Judkins, since he's joined the lineup, they average 95 yards a game, 17 fantasy points a game, but he's getting the bulk of the workload. He leads since week 3, he leads the NFL in carries, ranks 2nd in rushing yards, 4th in explosive plays, getting tons of red zone. He's 3rd in red zone carries, 4th in goal line carries. all that makes him a must start. And this week against the Steelers makes him a running back one candidate.
Yeah, I've been a fan ever since I took the dip everywhere. And you know that I did because you and I were drafting together when people were like, why are you drafting Judkins there? He's not going to play for the Browns. Hello. You know what? Blind squirrel nut. Let's talk about these sit-em running backs. And I got two big names here, Bob. And I understand that most people can't sit these guys, but I'm going to get into it. Number one is Alvin Kamara. Guys, he's averaging 3.9 yards per rush. He's averaging 11 points per game. He's losing snaps and touches to Kendre Miller. The Patriots come into town after holding James Cook to nothing last week. I still say that if I can acquire Kamara cheap, and we're talking about dynasty or redraft here, I think he's going to get traded because the Saints aren't going anywhere. But how do you start Alvin Kamara with any kind of confidence? And the same goes for Derrick Henry. And to say that Derrick Henry should be a sit is blasphemous. And I'm not saying that most people can do it because they can't. But since he had that 29-point game in week 1, he's had 30 combined points in his last 4 games. He's averaging 3.2 yards per rush. And the Rams defense has allowed the fewest points per game the running backs on rushes alone. So forget about the catches because Derrick Henry does not catch the ball out of the backfield. So, Bob, Alvin Kamara, Derrick Henry, where do you have them ranked this week? What are your thoughts on these two guys? Am I completely off my rocker suggesting that people may want to sit them if they can?
Well, if you have options, yes. And like running back is a position of found money. Maybe you had Rico Dowdle sitting around. There's going to be no Chuba Hubbard going up against the Dallas Cowboys, giving up the 5th most points to running backs in the NFL. This is a pretty easy decision in that case, or maybe even Rashad White without Bucky Irving. So there are opportunities to do this. The problem for Derrick Henry has been obvious. It's, again, did I mention volume, Fabs?
Yeah.
He's not getting the volumes. He's averaging 12 carries a game, and that's even with the huge week 1 performance, 169-yard rushing performance. It's not been right. We can thank the Baltimore defense. It's been a problem. They're giving up the most points in the NFL. They're on track to give up the most points ever in the history of the league in a season. So as long as they're going to be playing in these negative game scripts, this is not a good case for Derrick Henry. And by the way, if you look at the numbers, the yards per carry, the top speed, go to next gen stats, I think he's hit 21 miles an hour. It doesn't look like he's slowing down. Had the 2 uncharacteristic fumbles, but it just seems they're not in good situations for him. So that needs to change. And I don't know if this defense is ever going to give them the opportunity to do that. We may start even seeing more Keaton Mitchell at some point. Already seen plenty of Justice Hill. Alvin Kamara, the numbers tell the story. The passing targets, he's the 4th on the team in targets. This is not his usual spot, and that's limiting his value. And this seems like the shit. Kellen Moore, that's been a shift, right? So I think that's, like I'm probably still playing both of those guys, but if I do have an option, like one of those rising players or one of those guys that's kind of a target of opportunity this week, I'd much rather play them.
Would you buy low on Derrick Henry right now, or do you think things are just too far gone with that defense and with Lamar being hurt?
Yeah, I would buy low on him right now. And I think, like at some point, Lamar's going to be back. The defense is going to be a mess, but there are going to be games where they can lean into him at some point. But running back's a position of scarcity, and he is a starting running back in the NFL. So it's hard to just say, I abandoned you, sir.
Yeah, another back. And, the fact that we're talking about these 3 guys as sit-ems is just bananas. But Chase Brown, someone you don't think will reach his projection over at Football Guys.
Right. He's projected to finish as running back 20. I don't think he'll give you a running back 2 numbers this week. The workload hasn't been there. He only had 53% of the snaps. One of the things you could always say about Chase Brown was he was up there in the 85+% of the running back workload share. He's not there right now. And also the team's not good. Also, I'm not sure Joe Flacco fixes all the issues that they've been a problem. One of them has been interceptions. Well, Joe Flacco's thrown almost as many as Jake Browning. So we'll see. I mean, I think it's encouraging if you're invested in the receiving core that they at least made a move and they're trying to shake things up. I don't know that it helps Chase Brown at all, especially in a super tough matchup against the against the Packers defense that Javonte Williams aside has been pretty stingy against running backs. They're giving up the fewest yards before contact per carry, and they've given up the 2nd fewest rushing yards per game, 8th fewest fantasy points per game to the position.
Yeah, boy, it's rough in those fantasy streets, man, right now with the running back position. So next up, Bob and I are going to dive into the wide receivers and the tight ends, including a couple of players that maybe under the radar that you could start in a pinch. You're listening to the Locked On Dynasty podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you just don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down the $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets, and you can use that across the app. Now, to me, I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I've built parlays and tried player props, and I've even followed the live lines during the games. It makes watching football even more exciting, when you've got a little bit riding on the action, especially I'm a Cowboys fan, and you never know when the Cowboys are going to 100% implode and just completely crush my soul. I've got some action on the side in other games where I can have a little bit of fun, and FanDuel is great with that. There's no doubt about it. And so, whether you're a casual fan or you love diving into the numbers like me, like you're a stat head, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So this week, I'm going to give you a couple of props that I like. I'm going to go with Hassan Haskins to go over 34.5 rushing yards against the Dolphins. Their defense has been awful against running backs this season, and 34.5 is not a high total. And if Hassan Haskins starts and is the lead back there, although I do think he's going to split some of the work, I still think he can hit that number. And then I'm also going to go over on Bryce Young's passing yardage prop. It's 215.5. The Cowboys defense has been just awful. We talked about it being kind of a cheat code for quarterbacks. So 215.5 passing yards is not that high a hill to climb for Bryce Young. So what are you waiting for, guys? You have to go and visit FanDuel.com, download the FanDuel app today, and get started. All right, we are back here on the Locked On Dynasty podcast. We're talking starts and sits for week 6 because that's what Bob Harris and I do. So we are going to talk now about the wide receivers and the tight ends and a position at wide receiver where we had a lot of injuries and we continue to have a lot of injuries. But there are a few players out there that I really like, and one of them is Tedoroa McMillan. And why? Cowboys. I mean, he hasn't had that big game yet, Bob, like that big smash, whoa, Ted McMillan just broke out. I think it's coming this week against the Cowboys. Listen to that defense. They've allowed 15-plus points to 6 receivers, regardless of the alignment. And 5 receivers have scored 19-plus points against them, and 3 have had over 28. So this is the week for Ted McMillan to absolutely go hog wild and go nuts on the Cowboys. I'm not saying the Panthers win the game. Maybe they do, but I think this is a great week for Ted. And I also like Marvin Harrison Jr. this week. Earlier in the season, Bob, we were a little bit worried. He's got the dropsies. This is no good. This is not going to work out. Last 2 games, 33 combined fantasy points. You'll take it. And look at the matchup here. In their first 5 games, the Colts defense has allowed the 5th most points to wide receivers, and 4 have gone over 15. And I also feel like, and maybe this is just me, and you know me maybe better than anybody. Do you think that the kid wants to have a big game against his old man's former team? I mean, maybe there's some motivation there, right? With Harrison Jr.
It's possible. So I have concerns about both these matchups.
That response is no, Fabiano, you're crazy.
No, well, number one, your Cowboys love-hate relationship is always going to open the door for players like Ted McMillan. I mean, look, it is a great matchup. Both these are great matchups, right? The concerns are the quarterback position, right? For both of them. Is good Bryce Young show up? When does Bryce Young we saw down the stretch last year? When does he reveal himself once again? And we've seen brief flashes of it. We haven't seen it over time, but if they don't pressure him, maybe he'll get there. And especially, the positive here is the Cowboys offense has been unbelievably, you've got top 5 players at every single position, and none of them are CeeDee Lamb, right? George Pickens, Jake Ferguson, Javonte Williams, Dak Prescott, all producing at a high level. Brian Schottenheimer, creative play calling, who would have guessed, has turned into his thing. It's been phenomenal. So I do like that, and it'll force the Panthers to almost certainly play catch up. McMillan gets the vast majority of the targets there. The quarterback's concerned in Arizona as well. Is it going to be Jacoby Brissett? It's possible. Right. It is. He does have a lot of experience. Much of it gathered against this week's opponent, the Colts. So there is hope there. I think we've seen Brissett kind of fuel over at various times over his starting career. So I'm not saying this is an exclusionary thing for me, but it's not ideal. So I may be looking at other places, and my plays are even scarier than yours. So and you like Calvin Ridley this week, and the matchup is good. I mean, he finally had a good game last week. Give me your thoughts on Ridley's matchup. So I don't want to get too far out in front of this one, right? Because the Titans are not good. But again, 5 catches, 131 yards, had 10 targets. I think the 10 targets were what matters. But it's possible. Just possible. We're dealing with a situation where playing against Pat Surtain 2, Travarius Ward in Indy, and Houston's Derek Stingley Jr. had more to do with Ridley's slow start than anything else. It may be a combination of things. Maybe it's all coming together. He does, gets, in this week's game, he's set up. He runs 78% of his routes out wide. The Raiders give up the second most yards and the second highest pass rating to those targets. So he's wide receiver 32 on the Football Guys projections. I have him a little higher than that. I think he finishes in wide receiver 2 territory.
Among the wide receivers who maybe want to remain on your bench or be placed on your bench, I still have Brian Thomas Jr. on here. And the last 2 games have been better, but I mean, it's not what we expected from Brian Thomas Jr. We were expecting the guy who was scoring 18, 19 points per game in the second half of last season. And I know that we're going to get that now. Maybe Mac Jones made BTJ. I have no idea, but it just hasn't happened with Trevor Lawrence. And you look at the numbers. I mean, he's 40th. There's 39 wide receivers with more fantasy points than Brian Thomas Jr. right now. And the passing game, it just has to get on track for Jacksonville. I don't know whether it's going to or not. And so you talk about Brian Thomas Jr. and you talk about Travis Hunter. I don't see either of these guys being startable and having any kind of confidence. And again, Seattle's defense can be tough against perimeter receivers. So I think we keep that in mind. And then Jameson Williams is another guy. Jameson Williams has not done anything outside of 1 game this year. And look at the targets, Bob. I mean, 5 or fewer targets 5 times this year. He had 1 target last week in a plus matchup. And I know that this game this week against Kansas City could be a high scorer, but when I see the target share being so minuscule and I see the points obviously being non-existent, I don't know how I can trust Jameson Williams. So thoughts on BTJ and thoughts on Jameson Williams this week?
First of all, you're dead correct on Williams. He's a swing for the fence play. If you find yourself in going up against a lineup that's going to put up tons of points, you think, man, I need someone who's going to, who, if he gets a big game, maybe puts me over the top. He's not going to help your floor a lot. Brian Thomas Jr. still gets volume, so he's still a playable asset, more so than Travis Hunter. Although it looks like they're trying to get the ball to Travis Hunter a little more, and it looks like maybe they should, but you're right. I mean, we have never seen, peak Brian Thomas Jr. playing with Trevor Lawrence. We've seen it with Mac Jones, especially the final 3 weeks last year where he was wide receiver 1 in points per game. So I have concerns about both those guys as well. I think, I see Brian Thomas as a low end wide receiver 2 based on volume, but Williams is a guy, he'd have a hard time cracking my lineups unless I was at a serious pinch. And
a player that you don't feel will meet expectations this week, Jalen Waddle had a good game last week. No Tyreek Hill, so he's the wide receiver 1 in Miami. Is it about the matchup against the Chargers this week?
Exactly what you said. Everything you said about Tua, and including the part about Tua maybe not having a great game, worries me about Waddle. Everything else, I mean, there's a lot to like about them. He got most of the targets with Tyreek Hill out, 26% target share last week, and he had a great game. I just don't know that it carries over, and I don't know if this offense carries over from week to week. The Chargers, one of the best defenses against wide receivers, and I don't see that. I don't see that changing materially in this game.
I want to move on to the tight ends quickly here, and we'll talk about a few starts. Tucker Kraft is a very good play against the Bengals. Their defense has given up 13-plus points at 3 tight ends. No team's given up more points to the position, so Tucker Kraft coming off a bye is a very good play. I like Hunter Henry this week too, and I liked him last week as a sit because I didn't love the matchup against Buffalo, and he had a bad game. But now you got the Saints. They gave up 2 touchdowns to Theo Johnson last week. And, Hunter Henry at a very thin position has at least been somewhat consistent for you. So you could start Hunter Henry. Bob, you like Jake Tongas as a potential sleeper this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's the touchdown equity, right? Mac Jones seems to look into the end zone. The Buccaneers have given up 4 touchdowns to tight ends within the red zone. That's tied for the league's most. It's not a desirable play, but I think he'll outproduce it. He's a touchdown away. Guys like him, Darren Waller, they're a touchdown away from outproducing or outperforming their projections. We have a projection of Football Guys as tight end 14. I think he sneaks into the tight end 1 tail end ranks.
Among the sit-em tight ends, Mark Andrews, I think I've had him sit him every single week, and I've only been wrong once. So I'm going to just keep riding that bandwagon. 22 yards last week, all but 1 game, 30 or fewer yards. Lamar Jackson's banged up. It's not even about the matchup. I just don't trust the Ravens offense right now without Lamar Jackson under center. And I don't love Kyle Pitts for the same reason I didn't like Hunter Henry last week. The Bills have not allowed a tight end to score more than 7.5 points against them this year. That includes Henry, Andrews, and Juwan Johnson. So I do not love this matchup for Kyle Pitts. You are down on the aforementioned Juwan Johnson. You wouldn't start him this week.
I'm probably looking for other options. He's at the tail end of the football guys' projections. So tight end 12, I think he'll fall short of that number. Look, the first 3 weeks are undeniable. He was he was in the top 5. I think he was tight end 3 at the end of that run. But the volume has diminished over the last few weeks, and it's just not working for me. I'm not especially worried about Taysom Hill being back. I think he'll play a different role than the traditional tight end would. But Foster Moreau might steal one of the, downfield looks that might put Juwan Johnson over the top. I'll be looking at other options. With guys emerging at the position, it's easy to stream and look away if you don't feel comfortable. And I don't feel comfortable with Juwan Johnson in this one going against the Patriots.
All right. Hey, everybody out there, hopefully we gave you some good lineup tips this week. Make sure you check out Start 'em and Sit 'em over at Sports Illustrated. Make sure you check out Bob Harris over at Football Guys. Bob, you're the best in the business, the hardest working man in the business. I always appreciate you jumping on, and I'm sure we will have you on again at some point in the very near future if you'll, grace us with your presence.
Thanks, Babs. I appreciate it. Love you and Marcus.
And thank you all for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen of the day. For your second listen, get a double dose of the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler the Madman Rowland gives you a shot of espresso to start your football day, while Tony Wiggins takes you into the barbershop for the smoothest breakdowns to end the day. Find Locked On Dynasty on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.